I'm a 42-year-old guy and she's a 37-year-old woman. Our paths crossed at work. I'm a sound engineer at a football stadium, and she applied for a stadium maintenance and cleaning job one summer. I noticed her during a game when the stadium manager was showing the new employees around. She stood out from the rest, wearing expensive clothes, owning a fancy phone, and driving a Range Rover that must have cost a fortune. And let me tell you, she was drop-dead gorgeous. I was like, whoa, where's she been all this time? She didn't seem like someone who needed to work, but there she was. I couldn't take my eyes off her for a whole month, but didn't know how to approach her. She had this sadness in her eyes and kept to herself mostly. I tried getting some info about her from Stan, the stadium manager, who happened to be a childhood friend of mine. But it turned out no one really knew much about her or her story. All I got was that she was from Wisconsin, 34 years old, and came from a wealthy background. But that didn't matter to me at all. Stan suggested I should just talk to her if I wanted to know more. He said she often worked overtime cleaning the stadium after games, and there was still an opening for that shift, so he let me sign up. And that's exactly what I did. After the games that week, I joined the cleaning crew to help clean up the stadium, and guess who showed up too? Yep, she did. I spent an hour trying to tidy up everywhere except where she was standing, and I must have looked like a total goofball, making awkward eye contact. But you know what? She smiled and waved at me, and man, that smile was something else. It was the first time I had seen her smile, and it was absolutely beautiful. Even though I felt super awkward, that smile gave me the courage to approach her. She asked if I could help with her trash bag, and of course, I said yes. We didn't talk much that day, but I managed to get her name. Let's call her Karen. After that, we ran into each other from time to time during the after-game cleanups, and we'd help each other out. Our conversations mostly revolved around me because whenever I tried to ask personal questions, she'd dodge them. I figured it was the setting that made her uncomfortable, so I decided to engineer more chances to see her outside of work. Finally, one Saturday after the cleanups, she had car troubles and I offered to give her a ride. At first she declined, saying she'd wait for a taxi. But when I drove out of the premise and saw her still waiting, we both laughed. That's when I offered her a ride again, and this time she accepted. The car ride home was one of those magical moments I'll treasure forever. The sun was setting, and Michael Bublé's Call Me Irresponsible was playing loudly on the speakers. We were both singing along and having a blast. It was like she transformed from this quiet, mysterious person to someone radiant and carefree. Her hair flowed in the wind, and her eyes sparkled. I fell head over heels for her right then and there. When I dropped her off, she thanked me for the ride, and I mustered up the courage to ask her out on a date. She looked at me for what felt like an eternity, and then smiled and said yes. She said yes as a way of showing appreciation for the ride and how nice I had been to her. We went out for sushi a few days later, and the date started off a bit awkward. But after a couple of drinks, we both loosened up and started talking more. Turns out, we had a lot in common, like our love for seafood and the same type of wine. I asked her why she didn't talk much about herself, and she said she just didn't feel like it most of the time. It turned out that Karen's dad had a successful steel factory in Wisconsin. She grew up as an only child in a Jewish family, and it wasn't always the most fun experience for her, given the circumstances. Her dad was Jewish, but her mom had Jewish ancestry but wasn't. Her dad wasn't pleased with the guys she brought home so far. He disowned her twice and cut her off completely. That's why she needed a job at the stadium so she wouldn't rely on him for money. She had dated a bunch of different guys in the past, and they were all a mix of characters, from pills dealers to ex-convicts to crazy people. I could see why her dad didn't approve. She once told me she had a thing for broken and damaged people, and she liked living dangerously. I couldn't quite understand why someone like her would want to be with those kinds of people. But that night we spent together ended well, and it was clear she liked me. At that time, she had just come out of a relationship with an offensive pills dealer, but her dad made her leave him. She didn't want to leave, so he cut her off. Eventually, she left him when the police found hard pills in her car, which her boyfriend had left there during one of his runs. Because of that, she lost her nursing license and broke up with him. For the next 6 months, she sent me mixed signals, sometimes pulling me close and other times pushing me away. It left me confused for a while, but I didn't lose hope. We flirted for over a year before I saw enough positive response to pursue her more seriously. She asked me to help her pack up her things for the move to a place not too far from mine. She was struggling with rent and cash, so she had to sell her Range Rover to afford the new place. I suggested she should try to make up with her dad, and she agreed, but on one condition. I had to come along to a family function. We talked in the parking lot, and she gave me a hug that felt incredible. I wanted more of that kind of contact, and she seemed to feel the same way. However, she kept herself distant for the next week, and our courtship seemed to take forever. After a few months, she invited me to go with her to Wisconsin for a family party. The drive was long, but we made it there. She introduced me to her mom and dad as her boyfriend, which surprised me, but I didn't mind. Her dad and I got along pretty well. He was a bit overprotective, but not too bad. We both bonded over being die-hard Met fans, which gave us a lot to talk about. I guess he was just relieved that I wasn't some pills dealer or ex-convict. We respected each other, and when he asked about my plans for his daughter, I smiled and said I intended to marry her. He was pleased with my answer. The dinner went well, and we drove back home. While in the car, she casually remarked, "I guess we're going out now," and I took the opportunity to officially ask her out. She kissed me and said yes. We started dating, and a few months later, I moved in with her. Our life together was perfect, and we were really happy. A year later, I proposed, and we got married at a small country club in Wisconsin. The following years were pure bliss. She worked hard to get her nursing license reinstated, and after some struggles, she succeeded. We had discussed starting a family, and life seemed great. However, as time went on, we started facing issues, especially related to money. She had grown up in a privileged environment, and though she claimed money wasn't important when we were dating, her spending habits said otherwise. She constantly bought expensive branded bags, and her parents always seemed to need money from her. It bothered me, and I tried talking to them about it. Her dad understood where I was coming from, but her mom didn't quite get it. We had a major fight when I confronted her parents about giving her money, and she got furious, accusing me of embarrassing her. From there, things went downhill as other bad habits started showing up. She became irresponsible, partying and staying out late like a college girl, drinking and having a blast whenever she could. Her dad's influence at the hospital where she worked gave her special treatment, so she showed up whenever she pleased. The chief nursing officer had complained about her countless times, warning that if she kept it up, she'd be fired. We fought a lot about her behavior. I tried to tell her that she was now a wife and soon to be a mother, and she needed to be responsible, but she'd just tell me to go to hell and that she was only accountable to herself. Eventually she did get fired, but it didn't seem to bother her at all. Her mom continued to spoil her, ignoring everything I said, claiming that Karen was delicate and not used to suffering, and I couldn't understand that. Some days she'd come home late, and on one occasion she didn't come home at all. I had to go out at 3 a.m. to look for her, and her friends were surprised she wasn't home, as they had put her in a cab before leaving. Turns out she hailed a cab and went back to the club after her friends left, wanting to continue partying. When I got to the club, I saw her in the parking lot with a big guy in an inappropriate situation, and it drove me crazy with anger. I rushed at him, and we ended up in a scuffle, exchanging a few blows until the club security intervened. Thank goodness they did, because the guy had a knife, and he could have seriously hurt me with it. I got a few injuries in the process. Karen just watched and cried, begging us to stop. When we got home, I was furious and shaken. I couldn't handle the first aid for my wounds. I wanted her to leave, but she begged and promised to change. The sight of blood and injury seemed to get to her, and she felt remorseful and guilty. She stayed with me the whole week, and we had long talks. I suggested she see a therapist or counselor to work through her issues, and she agreed. She had a tough childhood and teenage years, neglected by her parents who only showered her with gifts and money instead of their time, so she ended up with the wrong crowd. Hanging out with pills dealers and obsessions had taken its toll on her. I took her to her first therapy session, and she felt better after talking to the therapist. I went with her to 3 more therapy sessions, and overall her mood improved, and she seemed to have more control now. I talked to her parents about her situation and what happened at the club the other day, and the fact that she started seeing a therapist. Her mom blamed everything on me, but her dad understood. She kept improving, quit smoking, came home early, and was thinking about going back to work. Things were good for a few weeks, but then she started slipping again. She'd be on her phone all day texting, and when I tried to talk to her, she'd say I was boring or annoying her. Whenever I brought up her phone use, she'd counter by saying I wanted her to stay home and go out less. We fought a lot, and I was getting fed up. One day I decided to surprise her and pick her up from her appointment. When she came out, she was holding hands and laughing with a man I'd never seen before. She introduced him as Charlie, saying they both had therapy appointments and met in therapy. During the car ride home, I asked her about holding Charlie's hand like that, and she brushed it off, saying I didn't need to worry because Charlie wasn't straight. I accepted her explanation. Things were okay for a while, but one day she went to her therapist and I left for work. While I was at work, a buddy of mine who works as a sports camera operator called me and asked about Karen. He seemed a bit odd and asked where she was. I told him she was at her therapist's office. He said he had a video to show me and didn't want me to freak out, but it was already too late as I was already freaking out. He sent me a video on WhatsApp. In the middle of the game, he had captured my wife in a hat, holding hands and kissing a man I recognized as Charlie. The same Charlie she claimed wasn't straight. I was so furious. And all I remember is my buddy trying to calm me down. As soon as I finished work, I rushed to the therapist's office. Even though her session wasn't over for another hour, I called her cell but she didn't pick up. The therapist informed me that Karen hadn't been there for a while and she had been trying to contact me but couldn't reach me on my new line. However, I hadn't changed my phone number. Karen had lied, claiming I lost my phone and had to change lines, and she gave the therapist the wrong number. I got back home, seething with anger, and waited for her. When she finally returned, I asked where she had been, and she said she was at therapy. I questioned why she didn't pick up her cell, and she claimed phones weren't allowed during therapy sessions. Clever excuse, I thought. I didn't let on that I had been at her therapist's office or mentioned the video. I wanted her to come clean on her own, so I asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me. She looked confused and denied anything was wrong. For days, I observed her from a distance as she went out every day, supposedly hanging out with gay Charlie and her friends or attending therapy sessions. Little did I know she was actually fooling around with Charlie behind my back. The thought infuriated me, and I couldn't believe she believed I was so naive. I hoped she would eventually confess and tell me the truth, but the weeks dragged on, and she remained silent. We didn't even talk to each other anymore. Whenever her parents called, she put on a fake happy act, pretending to be a loving wife so they would keep sending her money. She even invited Charlie over, with him still playing the idiotic charade of being gay. I lost my self-assurance as a man and sank into depression. The pain was unbearable and I couldn't muster the courage to confront her. Things continued like this until the end of the year. On New Year's Day, I asked her again if she had anything to confess, but her response remained the same. The family Passover dinner was approaching in April, and I had given her plenty of time to come clean and tell me the truth. In the meantime, I hired a private investigator to gather all the evidence I needed for what I was about to do. Then, I consulted a lawyer and had him prepare the divorce papers. The PI spent weeks collecting photos and videos of them together, holding hands in public, entering their favorite hotel, and even making out in a car. I compiled all the evidence on a flash drive. On the first day of Passover, her family gathered for a big dinner, or Seder, as it's known in Judaism. Everyone came together to eat, exchange gifts, and enjoy each other's company. We arrived late, and an argument erupted over her insistence that I wear an expensive suit she had bought for me. I tried to reason that my regular suits were just fine, but she accused me of acting weird and being annoying. I struggled to keep my composure. She claimed I would embarrass her in front of her family and especially her mother. Finally, we arrived at the dinner, and after prayers and the meal, we began the tradition of exchanging gifts among the adults. Gathering in the living room, everyone gathered at the Passover dinner, and even Charlie was there, pretending to be clueless and not straight. When it was my turn to give out gifts, I got her dad a Tom Seaver jersey, knowing he'd love it. For her mom, I chose a bottle of wine, which she might not have liked, but she smiled graciously. And for Karen, I handed over a small box containing the flash drive with all the evidence. She seemed puzzled and gave me a strange look, but I told her it held all the reasons why I loved her and some of our best memories together. The family found it cute, but Karen rolled her eyes at me. I suggested she play it on the TV for everyone, and they all agreed. So she plugged the flash drive into the TV's USB port, and the video started playing. As the pictures began to reveal the truth, everyone was silent. Karen didn't move, and tears started streaming down her face. Charlie's expression was priceless. Infidelity was taken seriously in her Orthodox Jewish family, and I genuinely felt sorry for her dad. I got up, approached him, and personally apologized for everything, then placed the divorce papers on the table, telling Karen that I needed them signed. Both Karen and her mom went on their knees, pleading and crying. But I stood my ground. I had given her ample time to come clean, and her apologies now seemed hollow since she was only remorseful because she got caught. I also went to her dad and offered my apologies again, feeling sympathy for him, embarrassed by his daughter's actions. I sat in the car and tears streamed down my face. Eventually, I gathered myself, went back home, packed up all my belongings and left. The divorce was finalized a few months later, and her family completely cut ties with her. You know how serious they are about infidelity in Orthodox Jewish communities. Her mother occasionally texts me, calling me a monster for supposedly ruining her daughter's life. But I've moved on and found happiness. Sometimes I miss her, but she's the one who caused all this pain between us. The last I heard, she had found a job at a 9-11 and was pregnant with a crackhead. It's a shame how her life has turned out. Despite everything, I still keep in touch with her dad. We've become good friends over time. Story 2. I just needed to get this off my chest because right now I feel like I have no one to talk to. Sorry if I start rambling. We're about to hit our 27th year of marriage this October. We have 2 kids. Our daughter lives with us. She recently got married and is waiting for her husband's deployment to the Air Force. Our son, on the other hand, is a Marine and lives on the opposite coast. Things have been rough for us for the past 6 months, mainly because I've been dealing with ED. To put it plainly, my wife has a high sex drive, but I can only go so far. I've tried multiple pills, experimented with toys, and tried to be creative. But for her, it's just not the same as the real thing. She started becoming more distant and even lashed out at me, saying I don't love her anymore or that I'm not attracted to her. It's tough for both of us, as I struggle with my own feelings of inadequacy because of ED, and there have been times when I turned her down for closeness because I know I can't fully satisfy her. It's a tough situation for both of us. My wife's always on social media, posting a lot. We're different in that way. I prefer reading what my friends are up to, but don't post much while she's constantly posting. Lately she's been sharing tons of pictures of herself, and her friends shower her with compliments, calling her beautiful. I noticed this one guy all over her posts, but I figured, some guy probably has a crush on my wife, but she wouldn't engage in anything like that. In the past few months, though, my wife's been growing more distant from me, and she's been getting upset, saying I'm not giving her enough attention. With everything going on with COVID, she's not working. But I'm working full-time from home. I thought maybe it was just the stress getting to her, so I tried to make an effort to be there for her even more. I'd come out of my office throughout the day to talk to her, but it seemed like she was pushing me away, shutting me down. Then we had a massive argument, and she laid out all the things she's unhappy about. She said I'm not giving her what she needs. Closeness, intimacy. Our current bed life has become a big problem for her, and she's craving something that no longer works for me. It's been tough. I feel terrible, but I don't know what else to do. So, in an attempt to figure out where things went wrong, 2 nights ago, we were talking, and her phone buzzed. I was right there, and it was a Facebook message from some guy. You know, the same guy who's been all over her Facebook, engaging with her, and guess what it said? Miss you, thinking about you. I was like, what the hell is this? She starts explaining that he's just an old friend from her childhood who reached out on Facebook, and they know each other's families, so it's nothing serious. But as the night went on, I started uncovering a series of lies, and it just kept getting worse. Turns out they've been talking for months, just reminiscing about family and childhood stuff. Then it escalated, and she was telling him about our marriage problems, but she swears that's as far as it went. But when I pushed her to be honest, it got even worse. They were exchanging fantasies about what they'd do to each other. She broke down, saying she was just craving sex so badly. But here's the thing. We do have closeness, but it's not the full deal. We do what we can without penetration because of my issues. Then she tells me she has to go out. She needs to think about all of this. I almost lost it and pleaded for her not to leave, but I held back. It's a mess. I thought she might be calling a friend. A girlfriend, you know? Then it hit me. What are the chances she's actually talking to that guy? So, in kind of a crap move, I went on Verizon's site and checked her phone logs. Bingo! There was a 30-minute call with a number right after she left. I got worried and started digging around to find out who it was. It was getting late and I was freaking out about why she wasn't coming back. I texted her a few times, but she didn't reply. Finally, around 2 a.m., I got a text saying she's coming home. When she got back, I asked her what she did. She told me she went to see one of her girlfriends, and I asked who she called. She said she called her girlfriend, but I knew her friend's number because our families are friends. So I told her, I know you made another call. She looked shocked, and I said, just tell the truth. That's when it all started pouring out. Throughout the night and into the morning, she finally came clean. She admitted they hadn't had sex yet, but they were planning to, and she said it was definitely going to happen. I asked her over and over if it was going to stop, if she was still committed to us. Every time I asked her, I got vague answers. She's confused and lost, she said. At one point, she promised not to talk to him, but the very next day, he reached out, and they talked for about 20 minutes. Sorry for rambling, but I'm lost and don't know what to do. I have no one to talk to about this. It's weird that she's seen as this pillar of the community, and I'm just the quiet, hard-working husband. If people found out about the affair, they'd probably wonder what I did wrong. But maybe that doesn't matter. I just feel like I have no one to turn to. I don't even know how to end this. The pain is overwhelming. It's like a physical ache in my chest, and I feel so sick. If you've read this far, thank you. I really don't know what to do. 3 years update. During one of the darkest times in my life, I decided to share this update because something incredible happened that night, and I want to offer hope to others going through tough times. It was tough for me to write this post as it's not my usual style, but I felt like I had no one else to turn to. Then, there was a reply that said, "I've sent you a message." I responded, and that's how it all started. This woman shared her similar story, offered advice, and supported me. We got to know each other better, and our connection grew into a friendship. We went from messaging on Reddit to texting, calling, and eventually decided to meet in person. Our friends warned us to take things slow, but something just clicked between us. Before long, we knew we were in love. Fast forward 3 years, and now marriage is on the horizon. I've never been happier or more in love. It's not lost on us that our shared experience of infidelity brought us together and formed a unique bond. But this has also improved our communication skills because we both understand that we carry emotional scars. The love and sense of security I experience with this woman is beyond measure. I'm sharing this today as it has been 3 years. You can and will overcome your hardships. Happiness and love are out there. The best advice I received during that tough time was to focus on self-improvement, taking care of myself by eating right, exercising, and practicing self-care. When I worked on becoming a better version of myself, I found that happiness and joy naturally came my way. So don't give up. Keep moving forward, and good things will come your way in life. Story 3. On June 14, 2020, I discovered that my wife had been secretly drugging me for the past 8 weeks to carry out an affair. She used crushed Ambien and muscle relaxers mixed into my drink, causing me to be unconscious. Despite my large stature, 6'10" inches and 250 pounds, she managed to move me from the living room to the bedroom while I was unconscious. We had been happily married for over 9 years, but everything changed suddenly about 2 weeks after the COVID lockdowns began. Her behavior and attitude shifted, becoming verbally abusive, manipulative, and frequently gaslighting me. Eventually, she resorted to drugging me. It turned out she was having an affair with her trainer in his home garage gym. During that time, she even asked me twice about collecting life insurance in case something happened to me. After I caught her and obtained a restraining order, my mom passed away a few months later. I've attempted to share my story twice before, but it gets flagged and removed instantly. Perhaps it was too long, so I'll keep this short. Through therapy, I learned that one way to cope with the trauma is to keep a list of the things I've learned, so my suffering won't be in vain. I'm sharing it here in case it might be helpful to someone else. If you put up with certain behavior, it won't just continue, it'll get worse. Learn to distinguish between what you want and what you actually need. Don't lose your identity to please someone else. If they don't appreciate your small efforts, they won't appreciate the big ones either, and might even resent you without realizing it. Be cautious of people who try to please you at the cost of their own well-being, as they may end up resenting you for it. Insecurity often leads to dishonesty. Personal worth and integrity are crucial for a healthy relationship. Don't let yourself become bitter, deceitful, or dishonest in any relationship. Respect your own boundaries, and if someone doesn't respect them, they don't respect you. Look for a partner not just for physical attraction, but for who they are beyond that, especially when sex isn't the focus anymore. Marry someone who has something to lose if the marriage doesn't work out. Marriage is an ongoing negotiation. Sex is overrated. Effective communication is what's truly attractive. Making mistakes is part of being human, but continually making bad choices after mistakes is what defines someone as bad. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't expect others to give you more than you expect from yourself. Update. I get that some folks find my words strange or insincere, and I apologize for that. It's tough to express everything concisely. I tried sharing the whole story twice, but the bot mods removed it right away, probably because it was too long. So, I'm doing my best to give a summary. I've got loads of evidence to back up my claims. If you want details, DM me, though I don't feel obligated to prove anything to anyone. Regarding the wording, somehow she managed to drag me, some people seem bothered by it. What I meant is that I'm a big guy and she drugged me multiple times, but I have no clue how she got me into bed every time. Story 4. My wife and I have been together for a solid 10 years, married for 8, and now we're raising two adorable kids together. She's the love of my life, and I can't picture myself with anyone else. Things started to change about 3 years into our marriage when she began showing a strong attraction to Asian characters in the shows and movies we watched together during our weekly movie nights. At first, I thought she was just kidding around, but it became evident that she was serious about it about a month ago when we were watching Chicago Med. She kept joking about wanting Dr. Choi, one of the characters, to be her doctor so he could feel her up. I laughed it off initially, but things got a bit uncomfortable when she insisted we stop watching the show after Dr. Choi got involved with another doctor. Looking back now, I've noticed that she's always been drawn to Asian men throughout our entire relationship. For the past few years, she's been obsessed with those K-pop stars, talking about how she'd rather be with guys like Eric Mun and Jimin instead of me. She even made comments about our babies not being as cute because they're not Asian. It's weird and hurtful, especially because we have a Korean friend who visits us regularly. I used to think she acted strangely around him, but I didn't take it personally until last night. As I was tidying up after dinner, my wife asked if we could have a serious talk. I was a bit hesitant, but agreed. She started by saying she felt our bed life wasn't as fulfilling as before. I was surprised and asked how I could improve things for her. That's when she suggested bringing a third person into our bedroom. I instantly knew she had someone specific in mind, despite her denials. We talked in circles for an hour, and eventually she admitted that she had been having sexual thoughts about my childhood friend and wanted me to watch them together. I was shocked and told her I didn't want to discuss it further, so I ended up sleeping in the living room that night. The next morning she took the kids to school and went to help her sister pack for her move. We haven't spoken since the previous night, and I'm feeling lost about what to do. I'm sitting in my car outside my office, writing this, unsure if I can face her at home knowing what she's been thinking. I'm considering a divorce because she's not the woman I fell in love with anymore, and I suspect she may have already acted on her urges with my friend. I wonder if divorce is too extreme of a response for a sexual fantasy. Update. So, after I posted last night, things were still tense between my wife and me. She was busy putting the kids to bed, so I took the chance to call my friend privately. I went outside, dialed him up, and spilled the beans about everything. Turns out, a few years back, during a party with mutual friends, my wife got drunk and tried to make a move on him. She started flirting, and when he didn't respond, she went in for a kiss. He was having none of it, and left the party early. I asked him why he never told me, and he said he didn't want to mess with our marriage over something that happened when she was wasted. They never talked about it and just kept being friends like nothing happened. Now here's the kicker. That party is around the same time her strange obsession with Asian men in media began. Putting two and two together, I thanked him for opening up to me and ended the call. I stormed inside and confronted my wife about everything. I was completely disgusted with her for trying to kiss my friend and suggesting I watch them together. I didn't hold back and told her exactly how I felt and what my friend had revealed. My wife finally admitted that she wanted to open our bedroom to my friend because she had feelings for him for years and wanted to avoid cheating on me. I made it clear that she already cheated by doing what she did, and it shattered the foundation of our relationship. I told her we're getting a divorce, and nothing would change my mind. Since then, I've been staying with friends and family, and she's been bombarding me with messages on my phone. But I'm proud to say I haven't given her any attention. I still see her briefly when I stop by the house to pick up my kids during the day. They're too young to understand what's happening, and they go to a daycare school program in the summer, so I don't stay long in the house. I've been looking for a lawyer to handle the divorce proceedings and searching for an apartment in my kids' school district. I feel liberated because many of you were right. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. As for my friend, I don't know if I can look at him the same way again. We've been close since childhood, and I don't want to lose him, but I may need therapy to work through it. I want to thank all my friends, family, and the supportive folks on Reddit. Your help and understanding have meant a lot to me and made me feel validated in my feelings. Thank you all for being there for me. I am William. Met Sophia, who's now my fiancée, around 2 years ago through a friend. Had a messy breakup with my ex due to her cheating. That really knocked my confidence down and I couldn't stop whining to my buddies about it. My pal Adam, one of my crew, suggested I start dating again or I'd just keep sulking forever. He had a point, but I wasn't keen on admitting it because I wasn't mentally prepared for that. The fear of going through that pain again held me back. Eventually, after loads of pestering from Adam and his girl, I gave in to meet one of her pals. That's when I crossed paths with Sophia. We all went on this double date with Adam and his gal Katie. Picked a nice restaurant for the occasion, and I pushed for them to be there with us. My first meeting with Sophia, I was pretty sure I'd screw it up somehow. I'd been out of the dating game for so long that I felt rusty. But you know what? That date with Sophia actually turned out pretty smooth. Having Adam and Katie with us was a comfort, because we had plenty to chat about. Sophia had just graduated and was interning at some office. She was all fired up about her future plans, and that ambition of hers was pretty appealing. I shared about my business, which was doing pretty well at the time. So when I got back home that night, I was feeling pretty darn good. It hit me that I was ready to dive back into dating, as long as the next person was worth it. And Sophia seemed like a genuinely cool person. After our first meetup, I shot Adam a text to thank him for dragging me out of my slump. He sent over Sophia's number and wished me luck. I reached out to Sophia, letting her know I had a blast and was looking forward to another hangout. She replied fast, saying she had a great time too. We decided to catch up again the next weekend. That whole week my brain was stuck on that date. The anticipation was driving me nuts. I even wished I had suggested an earlier day than the weekend. I know it sounds kind of crazy to be so obsessed after just one meeting, but I couldn't help myself. There was something seriously magnetic about Sophia. Finally, the weekend rolled around and I was free from the waiting game. I was super concerned about looking good, so I changed my outfit a bunch of times before settling on a dark blue shirt and slim pants. I got there right on time, and guess what? Sophia was already there. It felt a bit strange, but I went in and said hi. We sat down and got into chatting mode. And let me tell you, I didn't even realize how time flew by. The conversation flowed so naturally. We covered a bunch of topics and every single one was a total blast. Man, I was totally digging how well we connected after that. We started dating and I swear it felt like the best thing that had ever happened to me. In just half a year, we decided to take the plunge and get engaged. When Adam and Katie heard the news, they swung by to give us their congrats. They were over the moon for us, talking about how they couldn't wait for the wedding bells to chime. I was kinda leaning towards a chill, no-fuss approach, but my peeps were all about going big. They wanted a grand, fancy wedding, something that really showcased the joy of our partnership. Now, I wasn't exactly on the same page, but guess what? Sophia was. And when she's on board, well, I follow suit. So the whole wedding show kicked off, and let me tell you, everyone was pumped. We were scouting locations like detectives, trying to find the perfect spot. Sophia was all about keeping it natural, no fancy ballrooms with fake decor for her. We scored this stunning spot just outside the city. There were trees, flowers, the whole shebang. As soon as I laid eyes on it, I could practically see myself saying I do there. I asked Sophia what she thought, and let me tell you, she was just as blown away by the beauty. That place was seriously captivating and breathtaking. I was thrilled that I stumbled upon this gem. Sent pics of the place to my parents, and they were totally into it too. Man, I thought this wedding was going to be the stuff of dreams. Turns out I was dead wrong. One day I swung by the coffee house to pick up Sophia. She was chilling with her friends, and wouldn't you know it, Katie was right there too. You know, I was only familiar with Katie and Helen from Sophia's crew. Those two were the real tight ones in her circle. So, while Sophia was using the restroom, I got to chatting with her pals, killing time. They spilled the beans that they were scheming up a surprise bachelorette bash for her, planned about 2 months ahead of the wedding. I scratched my head, asking why they were jumping the gun like that. Katie, with her quick wit, explained that if they waited too close to the wedding, it wouldn't be much of a surprise anymore. Sophia's friends were throwing around jokes about having sizzling hot dancers at the party. I had to give them a heads up, telling them not to mess with my future wife's head and get her all riled up. But just as we were having this back and forth, bam! Sophia returned from her bathroom break, and that put a pin in our chatter. I whisked her away to catch a flick. And honestly, time was zipping by since we were knee-deep in wedding prep. Choosing the wedding dress, let me tell you, that was like the ultimate dilemma. Sophia had this keen eye for fashion, and all I wanted was to see her happy. Now, when it came to my tux, she gave me the green light, and I was cool with her choice. I had faith in Sophia's taste in fashion. She kept her wedding dress under wraps, said it was some sort of tradition not to show it off before the big day. And wouldn't you know it? I accidentally walked in on her once and got an eyeful. Man, I was stuck like a deer in headlights, 'cause she looked like she'd woven a spell with her beauty. She was like a freaking angel in that white dress, and I was utterly stunned. My jaw? Yeah, that was on the floor. I didn't see it coming, I'll tell you that much. And Sophia, well, she caught me in the act and gave me this horrified look, demanding that I beat it out of there. I couldn't help myself, you know? Stepped up to give her a kiss, but she kinda nudged me out of her room and slammed the door shut. After a few minutes, she popped out dressed differently. I was just hanging out in the hallway. Hopped up when she reappeared and finally laid that kiss on her I'd been holding back. She mentioned some superstition about not seeing the bride in her gown before the wedding. I threw my luck in the pot, told her I was down with that, got myself a smile and a kiss in return. At that moment, I was feeling like the luckiest guy alive. Then came the next week. Sophia asked if we could catch a flick, a new one that had just hit the screens. Had to give her the no, 'cause it was the very Saturday her buddies had in mind for something. You know, that bachelorette party plan. So, I cooked up some work excuse, and that didn't sit too well with her. I mean, I didn't think it'd be such a huge deal, but she was proper cheesed off. Thing is, she'd mentioned it a few days back. Maybe that's why she figured I'd rearrange her calendar or something. I decided to let her steam, all part of the plan to keep the bachelorette thing under wraps. When that night came, Sophia was over at her place while her pals swung by and whisked her away to a club, where they'd set up a private shindig just for her. Helen and Katie had dropped me a text about it, keeping me in the loop. Meanwhile, I was kicking back at home, watching TV and waiting for that text from Sophia that I knew was coming. I waited until midnight, but she didn't text back. I fell asleep while watching a movie. When I woke up in the morning, I checked my phone to respond to Sophia, but I was surprised to see that she still hadn't messaged me. It was strange. No matter how much we argued or fought, we never ignored each other like this before. And after the bachelorette party, she must have known I was aware of her friend's plans. So I had to decline, but she hadn't replied. It felt really odd, and I sensed that something was off. I tried calling Sophia, but she didn't answer the phone. I started getting worried. I went downstairs and had breakfast. I needed to check on her because things didn't seem normal. Sophia wasn't someone who would ignore me or not answer my calls. I was about to leave my house when my phone rang. It was Sophia. I answered quickly and asked if everything was all right. Sophia's voice sounded weird. She didn't sound okay. She said she was fine, but her tone told me otherwise. She blamed it on a hangover from last night. She had gotten really drunk and hadn't responded to my text. I felt relieved. 2 weeks later, I was at Sophia's place. She called and invited me over, saying she had some important news to share. She made it sound super urgent, so I headed straight to her place. Once I got in, she told me to sit and drop the bombshell. She was pregnant. I was totally surprised. That was the last thing I thought she'd say. I hadn't even thought about it, but this news didn't bother me. Actually, it felt great. I needed a few minutes to process this big news, but I was genuinely happy. The woman I loved most was going to be my wife, and now we were having a baby together. I couldn't have been happier. I didn't feel completely prepared to be a dad, but who really is? The important thing is being ready to give it your all. I hugged Sophia tight and gave her a kiss. I let her know how thankful I was and that this news just added to my happiness. But Sophia seemed anxious. She wasn't thrilled. Maybe I reassured her that we'd handle it together and I'd always be there for her. She managed to smile, but I could tell she was uneasy. I guessed it was the mix of wedding jitters and this huge change. I tried my best to comfort her as much as I could. The next day, I was at my office when my phone rang. It was Sophia's friend Helen. It was a bit odd, but I answered. Helen sounded really concerned. She asked if we could meet up urgently. I was hesitant because I wanted to talk to Sophia first. But before I could voice my thoughts, Helen told me I couldn't let Sophia know about this under any circumstances. It was connected to her. I wasn't comfortable with the idea, but I agreed to meet Helen at a cafe. When we met, Helen told me to take a deep breath and listen carefully and patiently. She shared that Sophia had been intimate with one of the dancers at her bachelorette party. I was shocked beyond words. Helen revealed that the baby Sophia was carrying wasn't mine. It was the dancer's child. I wanted to protest, but Helen took out her phone and showed me some pictures. There, clear as day, was Sophia with a dancer. Helen explained that she had tried to intervene, but Sophia was too drunk to listen, and none of the other girls stopped her. Helen had struggled to keep this secret, but when she found out about Sophia's pregnancy, she couldn't keep it from me any longer. Doing that wouldn't have been right. I asked Helen to text me the pictures. Back home, I cried my eyes out like a little kid. Once I was done bawling, I started planning my payback. I could have easily just called off the wedding, but that felt too simple and weak. Instead, I decided to leave Sophia on our wedding day. After a long week, the day finally arrived. I'd been counting down to it eagerly because it marked the day I'd kick Sophia out of my life for good. I set up a projector, planning to reveal the truth to everyone. I got myself ready, and things were falling into place. Right before the ceremony, I grabbed everyone's attention. I told them there was something I needed them all to see. It meant a lot to me. All eyes turned to the projector screen as I started showing the pictures and videos Helen had sent. A hush fell over the crowd. People gasped. Hands flew to their mouths at what was unfolding. Sophia stared at me, tears streaming down her face. I looked back at her, feeling nothing but revulsion. I declared the wedding was off, explaining my ex-fiancé was a cheater carrying some dancer's baby. Sophia collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably. She just kept saying sorry and crying, but I walked away and went back home. That day was one of the worst in my life. I was in a ton of pain. Being betrayed like that hit me hard. It was a hurt I wasn't ready for. But at the same time, I was relieved I found out before getting married. I appreciated Helen for not letting me live in that lie. For weeks, Sophia tried reaching out, but I didn't reply. I completely cut her out of my life for good. She left me a bunch of voicemails, explaining she was really drunk, out of her mind, and that it was a one-time thing. I just blocked her because I didn't want to hear those excuses. I don't know how it happened, but Helen and I started getting together. Sophia and her other friends had kicked her out of the group for spilling their dirty secret. Helen's honesty drew me in, and we began dating. A few months later, Adam told me the stripper who got Sophia pregnant had disappeared. Sophia had a baby boy and was struggling as a single mom, living a rough life. I didn't feel sorry for her. She brought it all on herself. Now, take a pause before you keep going. Story 2. 6 years back, I found out that my fiancé Ashley, 23 female, was cheating on me with Dean, 26 male, a friend of her sister Brittany, 24 female. This happened right after we celebrated 5 years together and were engaged for 2. About 2 years ago, my old friend Megan, 25 female, came back to town with her kids after divorcing her abusive husband Keith, 25 male. She called me and suggested we catch up, and I asked Ashley if she wanted to join to see Megan's kids, whom we hadn't seen since they were 2 years old. Ashley wasn't feeling well, probably due to some bad fish, so she told me to go alone to say hi and catch up. She suggested Megan could visit us on the weekend to play with the kids. After saying goodbye to everyone, I gave Ashley a kiss and promised to be home in about 2 hours. Brittany and Dean offered to drive Ashley home while I went to see Megan. At Megan's place, I was overjoyed to see the little ones running toward me, calling me Big Daddy. I'm their godfather. I gave them both a big hug, and Megan came up to me, gave me a side hug, and told me she missed me. She wondered where Ashley was, so I explained that we had dinner to celebrate our anniversary, but Ashley got sick after ordering the codfish and chips. I mentioned that her sister and her sister's boyfriend were taking her home to rest. I assured her I'd be back in 2 hours. Megan told me she was just putting the twins to bed and asked if we could meet up on Saturday along with Ashley. She suggested we all go to the park and have a blast. I agreed and said that sounded like a great plan. Megan wished me goodnight, and I hugged all 3 of them again, telling them they were welcome home and how excited I was to see them on Saturday. As I left, I thought about calling Ashley to check if she needed anything from the store. I tried calling twice, but it seemed like she wasn't near her phone, which is typical of her. She often leaves it on the divider at the main entrance of our house. I tried calling Dean, but he didn't pick up, which started to worry me, so I decided to call Brittany. She answered and asked how Megan and the kids were doing. I told her they were good and excited to be back home. I then asked about Dean and Ashley. Brittany mentioned that she had been paged for emergency surgery at work. I told her that neither of them picked up the phone. She found it odd that Dean didn't answer immediately, especially at this time of night, but said it's typical of Ashley not to pick up right away. My silence probably raised some questions for Brittany. She knew Dean had a habit of flirting with Ashley, but Ashley always shut him down and even made it clear he couldn't be around her unless her sister or I was present. Brittany tried to reassure me by saying that it's likely nothing to worry about. She suggested that Ashley might just be sick, and Dean could be helping her out, like holding her hair back as she vomits. She advised me not to jump to conclusions and to stay calm. She believed that Ashley is deeply loyal to me and uncomfortable with attention from other guys. Unfortunately, despite her calming words, my anger was building up. It bothered me that neither Brittany nor I was there with them right now, and Dean shouldn't have been alone with Ashley. Growing up, my family wasn't exactly the happiest bunch. I learned to keep quiet and only make a move when it was necessary. During school, I faced bullying due to my quiet nature. Brittany and Megan were my sole companions through my childhood and all of high school, more or less. Ashley showed interest in me when she was just 12. She used to boast about me to Brittany, claiming she loved me and couldn't wait until she was old enough to be with me. Brittany shared all the details with me, which I found pretty endearing. When I turned 17, right before my birthday after graduating, I asked Ashley if she wanted to be a couple. She was beyond excited to hear that, and practically jumped into my arms. For the next 6 years, I went above and beyond to ensure she was happy, well taken care of, and treated with the utmost respect and loyalty. At every party we attended, it felt like we were in our own world, just the two of us, dancing and talking. I'm not much of a talker, typically staying silent in groups. I always made sure everyone else had their say, never interrupting. Sure, I admit I've let people take advantage of me from time to time, but honestly, I didn't mind too much. Their lives were going nowhere fast, while mine felt just about perfect to me. I never once suspected her of cheating. She always appeared content with how we lived and all our date nights. Despite the difficulty in admitting it, she seemed satisfied. We managed to work through every problem that came our way, whether hers or mine. We always worked together to find positive solutions, and she was the one who often initiated emotional closeness. She had her personal boundaries, and I respected them fully. When it came to friends, I never wanted to push those boundaries. I took the time to get to know everyone because I wanted to ensure that the people I cared about were included in various activities. Putting others before myself was a habit I developed, influenced by the patience and humility I learned growing up with my brothers. After getting home, I parked a few houses away and tried my hardest to stay composed while walking. Inside, my anger was boiling, and it reminded me of my dad. He was a massive man standing at 6'7" and weighing 278 pounds, built like a powerhouse. My family had a strong background. We worked with steel beams, and we were all quite robust. I grew up on a farm, and my brothers and I all stood above 6 feet in height. Personally, I'm 6'4" and 263 pounds, with broad shoulders. When I got into a fit of rage, my strength became pretty intimidating. My brothers ranged in height, some matching our dad's stature, while others were shorter than me. We were a big family with 5 brothers in total. All of us ended up in construction jobs. I leaned towards design and building instead of managing a company. So when it was my time, I joined Megan's father's company, and let me tell you, I absolutely loved every year working there. Among my siblings, I was the calm one, the only one who had never faced charges, been jailed, or been involved in domestic misuse. That is, until that night at home. I stood by the front door, struggling to stay composed, attempting to convince myself that nothing was really happening. Slowly, I unlocked the door and went in. And yes, you've got it right. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. The words I heard made my face flush with anger. I went up the stairs, stopped at the door, and listened. There were and whispers, words exchanged in between heavy breaths. I stood there trying to figure out the best way to handle this, attempting to be rational, until I heard her say those 4 infuriating words. Man, recalling this hurts. Sorry, I'm upset and I don't know how long until I completely break down. I've been writing this post for the past 3 hours. A broken lane in my mind is messing with my focus. I overheard her saying, "Do that to me." It was something she never let me do. That was the tipping point. I lost control, kicked the door open, which shocked both of them. Neither of them knew I could get that angry. Dean stumbled back and was visibly shaken. She tried to explain, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. I just couldn't take it. I yelled at her, and I don't mean regular yelling. I mean a raw, primal scream, veins bulging, telling her to shut the duck up. She wet herself and passed out. I stared at Dean, stormed over, and grabbed him, shouting how long this had been going on. He admitted it had been 3 months. I just told him to get the hell out of there. He tried to grab his clothes, but I told him he was running home unclothed or not leaving at all. He took off, and I followed. When we got to the front door, I slammed it shut so hard that the frame broke, and the door went through the other side. The cops arrived a few minutes later. I carried the useless woman to the couch, removed my mother's ring from her finger, and took back the necklace I'd given her for our anniversary. The police arrested me and had a conversation with me. I spilled everything, telling them about her behavior towards him and my concerns that he might be hurting her. But those jerks were actually messing around behind my back for the last 3 months. Yeah, it's my home. But the moment I stepped in, it stopped being her place. They nabbed Dean not too far away, and that idiot tried to spin a tale about some giant monster breaking in and killing his girlfriend at his place. Dean dug his own hole, all right. I kicked the cheater out as soon as she woke up and I told her to rot in hell. Brittany swung by about 7 hours after she dropped them off at my spot. She saw the police tape and the whole scene. She asked the cop on duty about what went down, but they wouldn't spill the beans at that moment. She checked her messages from Ashley, then went to see Megan to give her the lowdown on the situation. Megan bailed me out, and her dad was there too, saying they'd cover whatever I needed. I just told them I wanted to see it all go up in flames, please. Fast forward to today, Megan and I are married now, and the Chaos twins are the older siblings to 2 boys and a girl. Ashley is completely cut off from my life. She's dead to me. In a twisted turn of fate, she's also physically gone, having ended her own life after getting pregnant by Dean and suffering a termination, only for him to bail on her. I can't deny that part of me felt strangely satisfied about that, though it's a painful emotion to grapple with. I apologize for the lengthy read. This took a lot out of me tonight. Take care, stay safe, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone walk all over you. I wish things had turned out better 6 years ago. Regrettably, I wish I hadn't asked her out 11 years back. Story 3. My fiancée, 26 female, was seriously spoiled. Things were handed to her on a silver platter, but she didn't seem to notice. She carried this notion that life was easy, and everything would just fall into place. I couldn't help but be drawn to her optimism. She had a way of attracting people like sunshine. Of course, people bent over backward to give her whatever she desired. She hardly had to ask for anything. We were together for 2.5 years before I popped the question. After a year of dating, I met her family, and they really took a liking to me. We grew close, and it felt like she was meant to be my future wife. We got into the wedding planning, and it was bound to be a grand affair. Her parents spared no expense, agreeing to fulfill any of their daughter's wishes. Then, one day she took one of her bridesmaids, Heather, along to order our wedding cake. When she got home, I was all set to hear the details and see the pictures of her cake choice. But instead, something seemed off. She mentioned not feeling well and needing to rest. I inquired about how it went, but she simply said they couldn't decide on one. I was concerned for her, but that was just the beginning of her strange behavior. Over the next 4 weeks, a number of odd things happened. One night, my fiancée told me she had taken one of her bridesmaids out to dinner because the friend was considering cheating on her husband. It caught me off guard, but I wished her luck in convincing her friend that cheating is never worth it. She didn't return until I was already asleep, and the next day, all she mentioned was that she did her best to talk her out of it. On another night, she left our apartment while I was in the shower. It came as a total surprise, so I tried calling her, but she only answered after 3 attempts. She said she realized we needed more kitty litter for the cats. After she hung up on me, I discovered a full bag of kitty litter stashed at the back of the closet, almost like she had hidden it from me. After she came back 3 hours later, without the kitty litter, I asked if she was having doubts about us. She immediately denied it and said I didn't need to be so concerned about her stepping out. This was both troubling and strange. I then asked if her friend was cheating on her husband. She was taken aback by the question, but admitted that her friend was indeed cheating. I mentioned that it was unfortunate and suggested she tell her friend's husband so he could initiate divorce proceedings. She gave me this look like I was crazy and said she wouldn't betray her friend even if she was cheating on her husband. I told her that although it's true cheating wrecks lives, her friend's husband deserves to know the truth about his wife's betrayal, because who would want to remain married to a cheater? She couldn't meet my gaze, clearly avoiding discussing the matter any further. All of a sudden, there was just a single month left until the wedding. My fiancé came home late, saying she'd been at a birthday party for Heather. Once she had dozed off in bed, I received a message from Heather herself. She confided that she felt uneasy coming to me, but she also felt uncomfortable keeping secrets. My fiancé had instructed her to lie to me if I asked about the birthday party. What's more, she was with Heather when she was supposed to be arranging our wedding cake. There, she met a guy who started hitting on her. He questioned if she was truly certain about getting married, suggesting he could win her heart if she allowed him to try. It took her aback, but she handed over her number and essentially gave him an open invitation. Heather asked me if my fiancé had been acting odd, or if I suspected her of seeing someone else. I admitted that yes, I did, and I thanked Heather for revealing this to me. While she was asleep, I decided to check her phone. I came across messages exchanged between her and AP even before she got home that night. He asked if he was capturing her heart, and her response was a definite yes. That night, as my fiancé slept, I secretly installed spyware on her phone to see what they were saying to each other. When she woke up, I informed her that I'd be staying at my best man's Josh place until the ceremony in a month, citing superstitious reasons. Surprisingly, she didn't protest or argue. In fact, she seemed pretty content with the idea of having the house to herself. During our time apart, she escalated the number of intimate and romantic messages she exchanged with AP, even going as far as to tell him he was a better lover than me. At this point, I was already coming to terms with the fact that our relationship was over. I knew I wouldn't be marrying her, and it felt like she was on the verge of calling off the wedding any moment now. You know what? She didn't call it off. She informed AP over the phone that she had to go through with marrying me, because her family had already given their approval. However, since I hadn't caught on to their affair yet, they intended to keep seeing each other secretly. Her plan was to frame me for cheating on her down the line, also she could claim the house and alimony payments. I couldn't wrap my head around the sheer maliciousness of her scheme. She aimed to utterly destroy my life, even though I hadn't done a single thing to deserve it. I confided in my best man, Josh, spilling all the details. He joined forces with me to hatch a plan for revenge against her. Armed with images of their messages, we plotted the most humiliating moment of her existence. The day of the wedding arrived, and we got ourselves ready, pretending it was the real deal. But here's the kicker. We had a few unexpected surprises up our sleeves. The chapel had these speakers set up, so we rigged ourselves with small mics. I stood at the altar, stewing in resentment for every moment spent with this entitled woman. As my supposed-to-be wife walked down the aisle, her emotional and supportive family snapped pics and filmed the scene. Then, out of nowhere, Josh stepped up, booming, "Hold up a sec!" His voice carried clearly, and it instantly made everyone squirm. The bride froze mid-stride. Josh locked eyes with me, even grabbed my face in a mocking way and quipped, "Guess we got the wrong lover, huh?" The crowd gasped as he darted toward the curtain behind us, yanking it aside to unveil AP. He was suited up, holding a sign that boldly read, "Marry me instead." And wouldn't you know it, the bride fainted. Pandemonium ensued, and folks were seriously losing their minds. Confusion hung thick in the air, but I could tell they were itching to direct their anger at someone. After she woke up with a damp cloth on her forehead, her family demanded explanations. Little did she know that Josh and I had reached out to AP, asking him to marry her in my place. Somehow we managed to convince him that this was her real wish, that their wedding would be a joyful day. He knelt down with his sign, and my fiancée just broke down in tears. With her family pressing for answers, she gazed at me, tears streaming down her face. Her dad had had enough. He grabbed AP's arm and yanked him outside. Right there at the altar, she sank to her knees before me, pleading for forgiveness, insisting that she genuinely wanted to marry me. That's why she hadn't called off the wedding. Not a single word escaped my lips. Josh began reading aloud the messages between her and AP, pronouncing the raciest words loud and clear. The room grew incredibly tense, and her family was starting to think she'd been unfaithful to me. Just as everyone began to exit, her mother let out a loud cry about how much money they had spent on the wedding. She confronted her, asking how she had the nerve to wreck her life and future by getting involved with another man while engaged to be married. All of us, Josh and me included, left my almost wife alone in the chapel. Since that day, her sole mission has been to regain her family's trust and support. However, after that dreadful incident, I doubt things will ever be smooth for her again. Following a confrontation outside, AP came to realize rather swiftly that he had also messed up.